Ladies and gentlemen, please do your magic and welcome with a big applause the director of Made in England, David Hinton. Yeah, and he's here.
Hiya.
Great to see you from a kind of distorted angle. Great to see you here, David Hinton. Thanks for this wonderful movie. We have little time left, so I will start without any ado. You're renowned for your dance films. You worked with Stevie 8 and Louis Newson. What was your fascination with the films of Powell and Pressburger?
Well, actually, my connection to Powell and Pressburger goes back to the 1980s when I worked on an arts program on British television, and I made a film together with Michael Powell when his first volume of autobiography came out. We made a film together for television, and so I kind of came at the films through knowing Michael, really, and we became friends, and we remained friends up until the end of his life. And as a consequence of that, of course, I got to know Thelma Schoonmaker, who he was married to at the time. And it was she who proposed to me that we do this new documentary.
So, and how did the collaboration with Martin Scorsese then start? How did you work together, actually, who put the storytelling and the structure to this?
Well, when Thelma suggested to me that we do this documentary, my first thought really was that Marty was the right person to present the film, because I knew of his deep love for Michael and his work, and there's nobody else that I'd rather listen to talking about cinema than Scorsese. So we approached him, and he was very happy to do it. And the way we went about it was basically I went back. He's got an archivist called Marianne Bauer, and she kind of keeps the Martin Scorsese archive. So I went back through his archive and sort of dug out everything that he'd ever said about Powell and Pressburger movies. And there was a lot of it because he's given a lot of, he's presented a lot of the films, he's introduced a lot of the films, he's talked about them a lot in interviews, and he's written prefaces to books about them and so on. So I basically went through this mass of material, and I gave it a kind of structure, kind of turned what he'd said into a script. And then, he then obviously read the script, went through it word by word. He was very, very incisive about what he did want to say and what he didn't want to say. He was very, very meticulous, and he would change just a single word maybe in the middle of a sentence if he felt the sentence wasn't quite right. So that way it became a collaboration. Once we had a basic script, we worked on it together from beginning to end, making the film.
It seems to me that there is like a repetition of circles of rediscoveries. So there were the original films, then in the 80s there was this first rediscovery of the films. Then around 2000 there were some biographies written, and now is the collaboration with Mubi. Maybe you can tell us about the collaboration with Mubi and the most recent rediscovery, because I learned that by the end of 2023 there was a big show for the last 3 months by the British Film Institute. Were you also involved in that one at the South Bank Centre?
Well, the original idea was that the documentary would be completed in order to, in time for the retrospective at the BFI in 2023. But actually, the making of the film went on longer than we originally anticipated. So actually, we finished the film late, I might say. But the original idea was that this documentary would be very much part of that retrospective. And Mubi, the connection with Mubi, obviously, that's something that came about once the film was finished. The film got its premiere at the Berlinale, and it was there that I was told that Mubi wanted to buy the rights to distribute the film in many, many territories around the world. And of course, for me and for everyone involved in the film, that was kind of fantastic news. So it just means that the film is going to be seen in many more places than I would have originally thought. So it's great.
And for us in Germany, it was a lucky coincidence that the world premiere was at Berlinale, and so that Pressburger sort of returned back to the city of Ufa, where he also had like very early important films. I was wondering, the title of the film is Made in England, and yet a lot of the film tells us about this great time of British cinema, which was actually a European cinema, and which was had huge contributions by emigres, by immigrants from Hungary, Germany, many other places. What is your take on the post-Brexit cinema in Britain? And do you think it needs European migrants anymore, or what's the state? What's your take on that?
Well, I think terrible. Brexit is an absolutely terrible thing, and one of the reasons we chose that title, "Made in England," was that there's kind of a deep irony to it, you know, in the sense that these films were made in England, but so much of the imagination in the films comes from outside England. Because basically, Michael Powell, he learnt his trade as a film director in France, working for an American film studio, MGM or Metro as it was then. And of course, Emmerich brought into the films this extraordinary kind of Eastern European imagination that's very, very, you know, his way of thinking is very, very unlike the kind of cliched idea of what a British film is consists of. So, yeah, there's lots of irony in the title as far as I'm concerned. We're saying, yeah, yes, these films were made in England, but the kind of the imagination, the consciousness that made the films comes from Europe and America as much as it comes out of English cinema.
Are there any comments, questions from the audience? We have a microphone here, and if you just wait a second till it reaches you, are there any questions? I don't see any hand raised. So my final question would be, we are now hooked on all those beautiful, amazing films by Powell and Pressburger. Is there a chance to see them all sometime, also on the movie screen maybe, or in the cinemas? Are there any plans for huge retrospectives now that the film is out?
Actually, the films are getting shown sort of all over the world all the time. Well, I know, for instance, that MoMA in New York, they're intending to show a season of Powell Pressburger films, you know, together with this documentary. And I spoke to Thelma Schoonmaker last night, who, you know, and she's very, very involved in all of the kind of restorations of the Powell Pressburger movies, always very keen that whenever they're shown, the kind of best version is shown. She told me that I think there's seasons in Hungary planned. But yeah, I can't really list them, but I think it's a great time for these movies. You know, there was that whole BFI thing last year where, you know, all the movies were shown in this country. So yeah, I think they're on in many places a lot of the time.
There's one question from the audience. Yes, please.
Really nice film, thank you. I remember seeing Red Shoes, I think in the 60s on television in Australia, and I didn't understand it. One thing we did experience in the film is the impact that Powell and Pressburger's films had on Scorsese.
Yes.
What was the impact on the British film industry and other British filmmakers?
Well, I think it's huge. You know, there's all kinds of British, yeah, so many British filmmakers now sort of point to Powell Pressburger films as a big influence on their work. I mean, I think immediately of Derek Jarman. I mean, he always spoke of Powell and Pressburger as a huge influence, largely because I think because of the kind of theatricality of the movies. You know, people think of kind of British, well, certainly when I was growing up, people used to think of British cinema as being mainly about kind of social realism, you know. And for somebody like Derek Jarman, who made a much more sort of flamboyant style of film, you know, it was great to have the example of someone like Powell and Pressburger there. I remember Sally Potter, when she made her film Orlando, she kind of went to Michael Powell to get his blessing on that film, you know, because again, she felt it derived so much from what Michael and Emmerich did. Or right now you have Joanna Hogg, you know, who makes movies that are very unlike Powell and Pressburger movies in many ways, but nevertheless, she always cites Powell and Pressburger movies as, you know, a great inspiration and influence on her. So there's three filmmakers right away who make very different kinds of British films, but who all claim kind of Powell and Pressburger as a great inspiration and influence.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
First of all, congratulations to a great documentary picture. I really enjoyed it. Could you elaborate on the impact of the propaganda content in those films comparing to something like London Can Take It? You used footage out of that movie. How did America receive, for example, this, the eye wink kind of, like joining the war?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. I mean, the first propaganda movie they made, which was 49th Parallel, was actually it was a huge kind of commercial hit in America, and in a sense it was a British film but aimed at an American audience, because the propaganda purpose of that film was to try and encourage America into the war, and I think it was very effective in that respect. The movies, other propaganda movies like Canterbury Tale, I'm not sure how well they went down in America. I would have thought something like Canterbury Tale was much more difficult for America to appreciate and understand, but actually that one wasn't a hit in England either. The one that astonishes me the most is Colonel Blimp. The idea that in 1942, in the middle of the war, they should make this film that's basically satirizing the British military and presenting you with this very sympathetic German character. That seems, an astonishingly radical thing to do at that point in the war. So, yeah, their audacity in terms of what they did in their propaganda films and how unusual they were as propaganda, that always astonishes and fascinates me.
Thank you. Are there more comments, questions? In preparing for our Q&A, I read somewhere that Powell and Pressburger are influential for the younger generation, for the Gen Z, and this shows sometimes in popular culture, in music videos, computer games, and stuff like that. Do you have any insight on that you could share with us?
Well, one of the great things last year was when the British Film Institute had this kind of Powell Pressburger season, was how many young people turned up to see the films. I mean, I think everybody was amazed by that, by how much of the audience was young people. I'm not very good at sort of, as you can tell, I'm old myself. So I'm not very good at saying exactly who the young people are who are going to the movies and what they're taking from them. But one person in popular culture who's always claimed Powell Pressburger films as a big influence is Kate Bush. Do you know her, the singer? I think she made an album called The Red Shoes, didn't she? But I can't reel them off, I'm afraid. I can't name the names. But I am very aware that young people are watching movies.
So if there are no more questions from the audience, then thanks a lot for joining us here on the screen for the Q&A, and thanks a lot for your time, and especially for bringing the Powell and Pressburger movies on the big screen again. Thanks so much, David Hinton.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.